It'll be great. Good evening and welcome to the Zoom webinar presented by Protect Geauga Parks. Protect Geauga Parks is a private C4 nonprofit corporation. Our mission is to preserve, conserve, and protect the natural features of the Geauga Parks and the surrounding areas. So we're very pleased tonight to have a special guest with us from North Carolina. Doug Elliott has been at this for 30-some years, and he is a naturalist, an herbalist, a plant lore expert, an award-winning storyteller, and he's a damn good harmonica player too. So I think you're going to be well entertained tonight as well as informed. Doug, as I said, Doug is coming to us from his home in North Carolina. And it's, I think, one of the few advantages of the pandemic is we can get people to present to us from afar. So Doug will be talking about some of his plants local to North Carolina, and probably, hopefully, some plants and lore that are native to our Northern Ohio region as well. And as I said, Doug is an author of several books, or I didn't say that. Doug is an author of several books. And after the presentation, I want you to stick around for the question and answers. And you can put your questions and answers in anytime you want. And then Doug will answer them at the end of the presentation. And also Doug will be telling you about some of the things that he has for sale and about his website. So you'll want to stick around for that. So Zoomers, here he is from North Carolina, Mr. Doug Elliott.
Okay. I think we need to get the pictures up.
There he is. We see him.
All right, here we go. All right, and then let's see. Well, all right. So soon I should probably put the pictures of the slides up. So. Oh, there we go. How's that? Does that work?
Looks good.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Well, I'm proud to be here. And you said I would be talking about North Carolina plants. Actually, I knew I was talking to people from Northern Ohio, so I really concentrated on Northern Ohio plants. And so I've spent some time up in that area. I spent some time at Cuyahoga Falls National Park, and I really enjoyed Northern Ohio, and so I thought let's see. I thought I'd probably start with the first plant that I know is a plant that I learned, and probably the first wild edible plant that I learned, besides maybe berries, and that's the wood sorrel. And there's lots of different kinds of wood sorrels, and they're distinctive. I remember as a little boy, we had some just like this in the backyard. My dad and I were out there, and he said, "You know, you can eat that." I said, "You can eat that?" And he said, "Yeah, we call it sour grass." Well, I tasted some of those leaves, and oh, they have the same chemical that's in rhubarb. That's oxalic acid, and it's very tangy. And boy, I tell you, that kind of woke me up, and probably it ain't stopped yet. I'm still eating wild plants. And you know, this plant actually has an interesting story about it. There's many different species of it. You know, one time I was in the woods with a Chippewa Cree Indian friend of mine, and he had been raised in northern Saskatchewan, and we were in the woods behind my cabin in North Carolina, and I was asking him plants. You know, I was so excited to have a Native American that was raised traditionally, that knew about these plants, and I asked him. I said, I was asking him different plants. Well, he didn't know those plants. You know, he was from northern Canada. Most of the plants I was showing him were from North Carolina plants. Then we came on one of these wood sorrels, and there's probably in North America, there's probably at least a dozen species of wood sorrels. You can find them just kind of anywhere. You can find them in all around your yards there in Ohio. You can find them down here in North Carolina. I've seen them in Miami. I've seen them in San Diego, all around. And I found one of these and I said, how about this? Do you know this one? And he said, oh yes. He said, I gathered baskets full of that. I said, baskets full of that? What would you do with a basket full of wood sorrel? He said, well, if you're along the trail, you're picking wild greens to make a salad and you don't have any salad dressing, you chop up a bunch of those leaves, you chop them up, put them in and mix them with the salad like you sprinkle vinegar on it. I said, what do you call that plant? And he said, we call it Cassia tawa soskia. Well, of course, my next question would be, how would you translate that? And he'd never really had to translate that before. And I could see him kind of working it out. Cassia tawa skia, let's see, means it's all there. And he says, I wonder why we call it that. We walk down the trail a little longer and then he goes, oh, I know why we call it it's all there. We consider 6 to be a representation of completeness, the 6 directions, north, south, east, west, sky, and earth. That represents totality to us. We look at this plant, you see the plant only has 3 leaflets on every leaf. So you think it's incomplete, but then of course you look and each of those 3 leaflets is divided into 2. So the 6 is there. And he says, we call that plant, it's all there. And we think that plant is there to remind us that if we look deeply enough within our own selves, we see that we too are complete beings. And that's what that plant is there to teach us. I thought, that's what that little plant's there to teach us? What about all these other plants? And there's so many out there. And we're not really raised in a culture where every being that shares the earth with us is known and assumed to have a story or a lesson or a teaching. But this kind of reminds us that it's all there. We can just squint our eyes or open our hearts and, realize that probably the answer to every question we have is there within the natural world. And when it's all part of the great creation that we're all a part of. And so that kind of set me off. I'll tell you, what a story. One of my favorites. And then there we go. We got a plant a few of you probably recognized before. In fact, there used to be let's see, this is a dandelion, right? And the dandelion's so distinctive because of those teeth along the leaves and that beautiful, beautiful sunny blossom that blooms. Probably just starting to bloom up your way, maybe not quite yet. And the French looked at those dandelion leaves and they saw those jagged teeth on it. They said it looked like the jaws of a lion. And so they called it dents de lion. That means tooth of the lion. Now as Americans, we couldn't speak French very well. We call them, we just call them dandelions. Couldn't make our mouths go dents de lion. We just go dandelion. And that's where we got the name dandelion. And it's interesting. If you may know a French person or someone who speaks French fluently, and ask them about this, and they'll say, "Well, we heard this wacko on Tiago Park's program, and he said you call it dents de lion. Is that true?" And they'll say, "Well, that's the old name for the plant. But we call them pissenlit. Pissenlit translates out to mean piss in the bed, and what that refers to is the general diuretic quality of the dried leaves. So if you want a general diuretic, you would take some dandelion leaves. Now, what's interesting is dandelion is one of the most nutritious plants you can grow in your garden. Has top of the charts for vitamin A, has vitamin C, lots of trace minerals in it. It's one of the highest natural sources of potassium. So here's this plant with the name of pea in the bed. And it turns out if you went to a normal traditional Orthodox physician, and they gave you a prescription for a diuretic medication, with that medication would come a potassium supplement. Because if you're going to lose your bunch of alkalites, electrolytes, you have to keep your electrolytes balanced. You're going to lose a bunch of fluid. And so here's this plant with the name of pea in the bed, also one of the highest natural sources of potassium. So you see, it is all there. And dandelions, now some of you might go out and taste a dandelion and think, whoa, they're kind of bitter. Well, what we often do is we'll pick the dandelions, ideally in the spring of the year when they're just coming out and the leaves are really tender. And then you get the leaves. What we do is chop them up and then make a sweet sour dressing with a little honey, a little vinegar, and then add your oils and your herbs and whatever else you like to have in it. But that sweet sour will cut the bitter. So a lot of times you can take a salad that's 90% dandelion greens, serve it to people who are like wild food resistant, And they'll say, oh, good salad, you know, don't tell them what they're eating until they've eaten a little while. Maybe next time you'll have help gathering your dandelions. So dandelions not only can you use the leaves in salads, but you use them in soups, use them in stews and omelets. You can take the flower heads, you dip them in batter and make dandelion fritters. You can take the roots and you can make dandelion coffee out of it. In fact, you know, right there in the Cleveland area, right near your area is the home of Dandy Blend, a dandelion-based coffee substitute. And there's the Goosefoot Acres over there still has books about dandelions and you know there's a song that kind of celebrates what I've been talking about, and it kind of goes like this. And I'm lucky here. I have my friend Cameron here, Cannon, and he's a percussionist, and so he's going to help me keep rhythm here. Dandelions, they're my favorite flowers in the sunshine or during a shower. Dandelions, they be popping up everywhere. They don't care. Dandelions, they never take a vacation. They always popping up without invitation. Dandelion, there's always enough to share. Well, I went to the store where the gardeners go to buy me some dandelion seeds. The man behind the counter said, son, don't you know? You don't have to plant them, they grow like a weed. Wow! Dandelions, they don't have to be planted. Why does everyone take them for granted? Dandelion, they're special as you and me. Well, you wake up in the morning, you're feeling kind of low. Your get up and go is gone. You need some vitamins, some remedies, some tonic or some tea. Well, look out in your lawn. You got dandelions by the bunch or the bowl full. Eat them all up, they'll make you feel so full. Dandelion, they're special as you and me. Dandelion, they're good for your liver. Eat them all up, they make you jump up and shiver. Dandelion, they'll make a long liver out of you. Dandelion, blow those seeds and make wishes for money, world peace, or lots of sweet kisses. Dandelion, they'll make your wishes come true. They'll make your wishes come true. All right, that's a song by Lisa Atkinson. She was on a children's album. I made the medicinal verses to go along with it here, but kind of fun, isn't it? Dandelions. I hope you all get to enjoy some. They're coming on really strong in your neighborhood. All right, and here's another early spring green. This is a plant called wintercress in the wildflower books, Barbaria vulgaris or verna, and it's in the mustard family. And down south, they call the plant creasy greens. And what you do is you can see there, just you gather them up in the early spring of the year, like they're probably coming on pretty strong in your neighborhood, and you cook them like you would a mustard green. Just boil them. You know, traditionally, a lot of times what they do. I can remember being with an old mountain man, and we were gathering creasy greens. He said, "Now you be sure you look them greens." I said, "I'm looking at them." He says, "I didn't say look at them." He said, "Look them." I said, "Look them." He said, "Yeah, that means." You can look them over real carefully before you even put them in the basket. Make sure you pick up all the dead leaves, all the dirt and everything like that. And that way you pick them up really clean. He said, "My wife will cook any greens I bring back, but I got to look them in the field." It means she didn't want to have a whole bunch of dirt in her sink, you know. And so they're great eating. And you can see there's a picture from down here in North Carolina. The picture on the bottom of the thing shows early in the spring of the year. See that the leaves aren't on the trees or anything like that, but the creasy greens are coming up. And there's a song one time I heard an old black man named Peg Leg Sam Jackson. He got at a folk festival, and he came on stage and he started playing this tune. And the tune goes like this, and it's sort of celebrating creasy greens, and some people say it has a lot of double entendre in it, but I don't think it really does, because Peg Leg, he didn't speak French, you know. It's kind of a chorus, goes soft and easy, good and greasy. How I love those creasy greens. I'm a Mississippi man from New Orleans. I'm crazy about them greasy greens. Greasy baby, soft and easy, good and greasy. How I love those greasy greens. Honey, you can cook lima beans. You can cook things so good I never seen. But when you fix up your table for me, don't cook nothing but them greasy greens. They sure are good. I'd eat them all if I could. Soft and easy, good and greasy. How I love the greasy greens. Honey, there's some greens up on your shelf. You must be saving them for somebody else. Here's some greens falling in that pot. How much greasy greens have you got? They sure are good. I'd just eat them all if I could. Soft and easy, good and greasy. How I love the greasy greens. I don't care what your mama don't allow. I want some good greens anyhow. I'll just eat them, honey, and I'll be gone. She'll never know we slipped them on. Soft and easy, good and greasy. How I love the greasy greens. Can't get enough of them. Give me some more of them. You can leave your jelly roll home. Give me some more of them. That's a song by Peg Leg Sam Jackson. And one time after I did that song and I talked about greasy greens, a fellow, actually it was in Ohio, he came up and he said, I'm a ballad singer. You know why they call them greasy greens? I said, why? He said, because the cress sellers in England would be going through the streets of the towns with their big baskets of cress, and they would be selling them, saying creases, 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 creases. So people who settled when the areas that are settled by people in the British Isles, a lot of times they still call them greasy greens, as they do down here in the South. And he said, I have a ballad about that. I said, you have a ballad about that? And of course, in England, a lot of times what they're talking about. So this is what they call dry land cress, winter cress. And there's two species. This one here is Barbaria verna, the spring winter cress. It has lots of little tiny leaflets on the leaf stem. This one here has fewer leaf stem. This is the one you have more up in the northern Ohio area. This is Barbaria vulgaris, the common one. And they're both good to eat. And they have, when they bloom, you want to give them, they're best to eat before they bloom. When they bloom, they have little yellow flowers. They're beautiful, have 4 petals. So then there's watercress. And I remember one time, it was in northern Ohio, somewhere in the outskirts of Cleveland. Might have been in Geauga County for all I know. I was up there with some friends, and it was about a foot of snow. We were walking around through the countryside and up and down, and came to a little low spot. The low spot, there was a spring. And the spring actually was still flowing, even in that cold weather. And there was little watercresses in there. So we got to eat fresh watercress while we were walking in the snow. And that was quite a memorable experience in northern Ohio. And my friend said, this ballad goes like this. I met a fair young damsel come skipping down the lane, and her voice, it was the clearest of any I did hear. She had a bunch of early onions, some pickles and strong beer. And a bunch of water creases. I quickly stepped up to her and unto her did say, I'm on my way to Cumberland, can you direct my way? Oh yes, sir, quickly she did say, take the turn at your left and go down the other way. Well, we walked along together side by side, and oft times I wish she was my lawful wedded bride. So I asked her this question, half in earnest, half in joke, and these are the words that unto her I spoke. I got cows, I've got pig, I've got sheep, and I've got geeses. Likewise, I've got a dairy full of buttermilk and cheeses. If you'd consent to Mrs. Now, fair lady of all leases, we'd spend our life in love and water creases. But since you have been so generous, I believe I may prepare the matrimonials and then we'll end the day. I've a wedding dress to buy and some little bills to pay. I gave to her a sovereign, her debts for to defray. 'Twas early the next morning, a letter I received. Kind sir, for disappointing you, I do apologize. But when you pick a partner in a partnership for life, be sure you pick a widow or a maiden, not a wife. I have a husband of my own, and his name is William Gray. When I can well afford it, your sovereign back I'll pay. To think that I would marry you upon the 1st of May, you must have been greener than water creases. So that's a song celebrating the watercress. So be careful about what you may propose while you're looking for watercress. But when you find it in those clear springs, it's just a wonderful, wonderful wild green to eat. And here's a plant called pokeweed. And a lot of us know pokeweeds because they have those brilliant purple berries in the fall of the year. And it's interesting because poke is mentioned in the wild food books, is also mentioned in the poisonous plant books, and also mentioned in the medicinal plant books, which is kind of a reminder that sometimes the difference between food, medicine, and poison is really just a matter of dosage. And when they talk about pokeweed, in the South, in a lot of areas, it's called poke salad. And I can remember talking back to the lander about my generation. He said, yeah, we moved back to West Virginia. We talked to our old neighbor over there, and he pointed out this plant and said, this is poke salad, you can eat that. And so he said we took it and made a big old tossed salad out of that. And I tell you, we ate that and we were puking for days. And what he didn't realize was that when that old man said, he didn't say salad, S-A-L-A-D, he said S-A-L-L-E-T. And salad means a cooked green. In the case of pokeweed, it actually has some very potent chemicals in it. And so traditionally, it's always cooked in 2 or 3 waters. That means you let it boil for a little while, pour the water off, boil it again, pour the water off, boil it again, pour the water off. And it's amazing because it holds its form and still has good flavor. And, a lot of us are kind of health food freaks. And when we eat greens, we save the water, we save the juice, that's called pot liquor, and we drink it. But in the case of pokeweed, I think we need to follow traditional wisdom and dispose of the first couple of waters to take away any toxins. And then it's really quite good. And see, here's a couple of commercial cans. And it's interesting. They didn't realize it was S-A-L-L-E-T either. But it's certainly cooked to go in the cans. But here's one you see they pronounce it, they spell it correctly, salad. And there's Tony Joe White was one of the swamp rockers in the 60s. He was raised in northern Louisiana, and he was a sharecropper's son. And he said that down the road from him, there was this other family, and they weren't they were kind of dysfunctional in lots of ways. And they had one teenage girl there, and she kind of kept the family together, and she kept them fed mostly by foraging wild foods. And she would come to their garden patch, and she'd ask them, and they let her pick all the poke that was growing around the edge of the garden patch. She'd take it back in a big old sack and feed her family. And Joe Wright wrote a song about her, and that song actually was ended up being covered by. It was a top 40 song, and ended up being covered by Elvis Presley. And I've even covered a little version of it myself here. And since we're having such a good time with all these tunes here, might as well to teach you this song here. This is called Poke Salad Annie. Poke Salad Annie, and then your part, if you wanted to sing along with me, you just repeat the poke salad part here. Maybe I can get my friend Cannon to do it here. Poke Salad Annie. Poke Salad Annie. Gator got your granny. Gator got your granny. Everybody thought it was a shame, but her mama was working on the chain gang. Mean vicious woman now. We're talking about high Southern culture here, Down in Louisiana where the alligators grow so mean. There's a girl, I swear to the world, she makes them alligators look tame. Poke Salad Annie. Poke Salad Annie. Gator got your granny. Gator got your granny. Everybody thought it was a shame, but her mama was working on a chain gang. Mean dirty woman now. Every evening about supper time, Annie come down to my truck patch, pick herself a mess of poke salad, Cat on home in a toe sack, poke salad Annie. Gator got your granny.
Yeah, got your granny.
Everybody thought it was a shame, but mama was working on a chain gang. Mean vicious woman now. There's another verse or two about her no count brothers and stuff like that, but basically this they got the idea across. That's 20th century ethnobotany. There it is, you know. So all right, we'll get on with pokeweed here and see what else we can come up with. Oh, and also in the gardens, in your gardens, if you have a good rich garden, you're probably going to see one of these plants here. It's in a plant called Chenopodium, the goosefoot family. This is what they call lamb's quarters. And these are a very nutritional plant, and they grow very easily in your garden, and they're more nutritional than a lot of your garden vegetables. One of the, near the top of the chart for vitamin A and have other trace minerals involved in them. And there's two kinds of them that we've found recently. This is the typical one, Chenopodium alba. But now and then we'll find some that are purple like that. It's actually a different species called Chenopodium gigantea, and lately it's been actually offered in the garden catalogs, sometimes sold in gourmet restaurants, called purple spreen. And so I recommend if you have that in your garden, don't weed it out, don't weed them, just eat them, right? All right, let's see what else we got here. And then there's good old sassafras. I remember my grandmother showing me, she said, you can always tell sassafras because there's 3 different kinds of leaves on the same plant. So it has sometimes a big oval leaf like that, has a 3-fingered leaf like that, and then it has a mitten-shaped leaf like that. And sassafras root makes a really good tea. And sassafras tea it comes from the bark of the root. And it's delicious, it's traditional spring tonic. And actually the leaves are actually used too. You know, I remember one time being down in Louisiana, and I was stopping in a little Cajun cafe, and I ordered a bowl of gumbo. And on the counter, they had some salt shakers there. One of them had salt in it, one had pepper in it, one other one had this green stuff in it. And when the woman brought me out the gumbo, which is like a stew or a soup, she said, "Now, honey, you put some of this filet on there. That'll make it thicken it up really good, make it taste good." And it turned out the gumbo filet is actually powdered sassafras leaves. Whoops. Oh, I'm getting mixed up here. Let's see. There you go. So gumbo filet, and I don't know if you can quite read that, but it does say sassafras leaves. And so if you ever want to make your own gumbo filet, you just get some sassafras leaves, pick them when they're in their prime, and then dry them and powder them. You've got gumbo filet. You know that song, jambalaya, crawfish pie, filet gumbo. Summer gun, we have big fun on the bayou. That's what he's singing about, filet gumbo. You know, you can use okra for gumbo, you can use filet as well. So, all right, let's see what else we got here. Am I going the right way? Let's see, maybe this way. All right, here's a riddle. White as snow, but snow it ain't. Green as grass, but grass it ain't. Red as blood, but blood it ain't. Black as coal, but coal it ain't. What is it? That's an old folk riddle. And the answer is blackberries. You think, now what's white about a blackberry? White as snow? Well, you think about a whole blackberry, and there you go. There you go. The blossom is white as snow. You know, there's this thing called blackberry winter, and you all have blackberry winters up there. What that's all about is, you know, it gets to be springtime, especially in these days of global warming and all like that. It's be springtime, and you get your tomato plants, and you got them home, and they're getting leggy and starting to get big. And you want to put them out in the garden. It's been warm for 3 or 4 weeks. You think, oh man, you know, not quite frost date yet, but oh, I want to get these tomatoes in the ground. And then all of a sudden you hear the weather report say, "Oh, cold front blowing in from the northwest tonight. Might be down in the lower 30s. You might just," and you look out and you see the blackberries in bloom. You might just wait a little longer, because that might be the blackberry winter that's coming. Because sometimes when the blackberries in bloom, that last frost that'll come in will actually be enough to freeze, and you don't want to get your tomatoes frozen. And you know, the great anthropologist Margaret Mead, she titled her autobiography Blackberry Winter. And in the beginning of the book, there's a little invocation that says, it's often said blackberries won't be sweet unless frost has touched their bloom. And now I think she's speaking metaphorically, you know, as we get older, and the frost touches our bloom, we hope we get sweeter, you know, but you talk to country folks and they'll say, well, you know, that's really true. What'll happen is if frost comes in when the blackberries are in bloom, it'll kill some of the blooms, but only certain blossoms that are vulnerable. A lot of blossoms will still remain to produce berries, but there'll be less berries, so the crop will be thinned. So the berries will be sweeter if frost touches their bloom. So it's just kind of interesting to think about how that works, you know. So there it is, white as snow, but snow it ain't, right? Green as grass, but grass it ain't. Red as blood, but blood it ain't. Black as coal, but coal it ain't. That's the blackberry. And you know, a lot of you came here tonight to boogie along with me. And I'm here to boogie too, because what else we got to do here tonight? Let's just talk about plants and boogie. And there's a song, it's called the Blackberry Boogie. It goes something like this. As a call and response chorus, maybe I can get my friend Cannon to sing along with me. Blackberry boogie, blackberry boogie, blackberry boogie, blackberry boogie, blackberry boogie, I'll meet you in the middle of the patch. Long about sun up every day, I grab my basket, I'm on my way. I run down the road just laughing and kicking, heading for the patch to do some blackberry picking. Fill my basket up to the top, makes my lips go flippity flop, flippity flop. Well, I hear a little voice and it sounds so sad. It says, don't pick me now, cause I ain't ripe, Dad. Blackberry boogie, blackberry boogie, blackberry boogie, blackberry boogie, blackberry boogie, I'll meet you in the middle of the patch. I went to see my gal, I set my basket down. She says, hey there, baby, are you going to town? I said, honey, I'm going to scratch. I'll meet you in a minute in the blackberry patch. She grabbed her basket, she jumped and squealed. I'm heading for the bushes and she's hot on my heels. Blackberry boogie, blackberry boogie, blackberry boogie, blackberry boogie, blackberry boogie, I'll meet you in the middle of the patch. Going through the bush, walking hand in hand, picking blackberries just to beat their band. Grabbing for a kiss, she said, turn me loose. Your lips are all blue from that blackberry juice. I said, come on, honey, now, don't be coy. Don't you know I'm your blackberry picking boy? Well, I kissed her once, she let out a sigh. She said, let's go to my house and bake a pie. Blackberry boogie, blackberry boogie, blackberry boogie, blackberry boogie, blackberry boogie, I'll meet you in the middle of the patch. Blackberry boogie, I'll meet you in the middle of the patch. Blackberry boogie, I'll meet you in the middle of the patch. All right, that song was written by Tennessee Ernie Ford probably 50 years ago or more. I think it's fun to be boogieing to the same tune my grandparents might have been boogieing to, you know. So, all right, well, let's get on with it here. This reminds me of a Native American story. The story about a man and a woman who'd been together for a long time, and somehow they weren't getting along very well. And she didn't feel like he respected her, and he did respect her. He did love her, but somehow it wasn't coming through. And she got so frustrated. She got so mad one day. She just stomped out of that lodge. Down the trail she went. She didn't know where she was going. She had a pain in her heart. She had a lump in her throat. All she knew she was getting out of there. And so she headed out on the trail. And he didn't know what to do. She never actually left before, and so he moped around the lodge for about half the day, and then he realized he better go out there and find her. Now, he was a good tracker. He could follow her tracks really well. And he could see her. He could tell a whole lot just from looking at her tracks. He could look at the way that heel hit the ground. He could tell that she was stomping mad. And he could tell from how far apart her footprints were that she was walking fast. And so he jogged along that trail for about a couple hours. It seemed like every time he'd see a set of her tracks, he could tell how old they were. And he realized he was unable to close the distance between them. So he sat down there in the trail and he prayed. He had a conversation with the powers and said, you don't have to change your mind, but could you just maybe slow her down a little so I could talk to her? And and maybe something will happen. And so it seemed like maybe his prayers were heard, because as she was walking along, the breeze in the trees started whispering. They were calling her name. And then the birds began singing, but she wasn't listening to the birds. She wasn't listening to the trees. The birds started calling symphonies and harmonies and melodies, and they were calling her name, but she wasn't listening to the birds. She was looking straight at that trail. She was just heading out of there. She was going to take special intervention. She was hard to reach. And then right there beside the trail, she saw a berry, but it wasn't like any berry she'd ever seen before. So she stopped and she picked that berry and smelled it. It smelled good. She tasted a little bit of it. Oh, wonderful flavor. Had a sweetness to it, had a little bit of tang to it. She thought, oh my. And she ate that berry. Oh, it was delicious. And then she looked around. There was a few more of them out there. She found a couple more, and then she looked around. She thought she couldn't find anything. She found there was like a kind of a meadow, and they were all mixed in there with the meadow grasses. She started eating those berries, and that juice started trickling down her throat, kind of softened that lump in her throat, kind of softened that hard spot in her heart. And the birds were singing so beautifully, and the breeze in the trees. And she looked, and the flowers were blooming all around her. And then she looked up and she saw her husband. As soon as she saw the expression on his face, she said, "You ought to try these berries." And you know, they say they stayed in that field for a long time before they got up out of the field. When they did, they were walking back hand in hand. All along that trail where they'd never seen them before, they saw those berries. And those berries are still out there. They're the first berries to come on after the cold freezes of winter are over. And you know, the Native Americans, if you talk to them in their native language, almost all of their native languages translate the name of the berry as heartberry, because they're shaped like the human heart. And you know, when we can actually plant them in our gardens, and when we do, we mulch them with straw, and we call them strawberries. That's how the first strawberry came to be. That's an old Indian legend. Pan tribal, many different tribes tell a similar version of the same lesson. And don't we love it when we find wild strawberries? My goodness. Oh, while we're doing riddles, how about this one? Hey diddle hi, hey diddle hey, there's a big black stain in our driveway. High as a house, low as a mouse, got more rooms than anyone's house. Hey diddle hey diddle hiddle, look inside, there's a possum in the middle. What is it? That's a tough riddle, isn't it? And then the middle of that riddle, it's actually a traditional riddle. I added a little bit to it here. All right, what is it? What is it? Did any of you guess what it is? Black walnuts. So howdy, howdy, hi, howdy, howdy, hey, there's a big black stain in my driveway. Well, there it is. You know, black walnuts have a big husk on them. And the husk is really full of brown dye, and it'll stain really, really intensively. So what traditional people do is they just pour the black walnuts out in their driveway, drive over them for a week or so, and then rake them out of the driveway, hose them off. You can see the step of it down here. Hose them off, and then dry them. And then you can use a cracker, or you can use a rock, or whatever you want to do, crack them open. So high as a house, low as a mouse. Well, high as a house, the tree is high as a house, right? The walnut, when it falls down, it's low as a mouse, right? Got more rooms than anyone's house. You ever see all those little tiny rooms inside of a black walnut? Got more rooms than my house, that's for sure. And well, what about hey diddle hi, hey diddle diddle, look inside, there's a possum in the middle? Now, what's that got to do with? Well, I can tell you, we were really surprised when we were cracking a bunch of walnuts and saw a possum looking back at us. And I'll show you where the possum is. These black walnut shells. Look at those possums. I mean, look at that. And they look just like an old possum. Look at it. Some don't look as clear as the others, but look at all these little possums in there. So there you go. So the next time you crack some black walnuts, see if you can find a possum. That'll keep you busy. Black walnuts are wonderful because they'll keep for a couple of years. You just have to keep the mice out of them. That's all. Many years ago, I made my living as a traveling herbalist. I would go to folk festivals and I set up a booth with herbs and teas and old-time remedies. It's kind of before there was herb shelves in the health food stores. And I had different kinds of remedies and herb teas. and I go to these folk festivals, and it was really wonderful because a lot of times the folk festival had traditional people playing music. And a lot of traditional people that are musicians also are country folks, and they know a lot about traditional healing methods. So in some ways, that was my classical education. And so, so one time I was at this folk festival, and I heard Bessie Jones was invited. Bessie Jones was a national treasure. She actually had a national folk arts heritage award because she was raised by her grandparents who had been slaves. And so she was a direct connection to slave time. And she would come and she would bring her tambourine and whatever members of her church wanted to come along. And she would just sing these a cappella gospel tunes that would just knock the audience flat with the power of her singing. And I can remember one time I had my little herb booth there, and I hear, "Here's something I like. Now, yes, sir, I get all my medicine out the woods and the fields. Yes, sir, I get all my medicine out the woods and the fields." And she's coming up to my herb booth, and she went down the road, looked at every one of those herbs. "What's this? What's this?" Well, of course, she was raised in South Georgia, so she had a lot of different names than I had for the same plants. Sometimes she had the same name for different plants. And so we go down to the road and we talk to her. I realized she was a real repository of a lot of traditional knowledge about healing knowledge. And so I was traveling around in the South a lot, and I asked her if I'd come visit her sometime. And she said that'd be all right. And she gave me her number, and I called her up one time, and we were out in the backyard there. And there's a whole lot of stories that goes with that, but we were out in the backyard, and we see this little plant going out back there. And you have it up there in Northern Ohio as well. And you can recognize it kind of grows out in the fields. It's called Solanum carolinianum. It's called bull nettle, or horse nettle, or bullweed. And later on, you can see it's in the Solanum family, same family as tomatoes and potatoes and things like that. It looks like little tomatoes, but they're not edible at all. And they have these thorns on them. See the thorns? And I asked, we were out on the edge of Bessie's. So they had a little garden in their backyard. And I see that, and I just asked her, because I realized the best way to get someone to talk about plants is to show them a plant and ask them about it. I said, "What's that plant called?" She said, "That's called tread softly." Took me a little while to realize what she was saying. She was saying tread softly, because it has thorns on it. If you're around barefoot, you tread softly when you get near that plant. And I said, "Is it good for anything?" She said, "For babies when they're teething." Now, I was in my 20s back then. I didn't know anything about babies or teething or anything like that. But because she told me about it, it kind of stuck with me. And I just kind of remembered that. And many years later, I was at a primitive skills and earth skills event where they invited some Native Americans, and they invited Walker Calhoun. Walker Calhoun was a Cherokee elder, and he knew a lot of traditional songs. He would come and play some traditional songs for the group. And we were sitting around the edge of this field, and there was some of this bull nettle there. And I said, "Walker, do you know what this is?" He said, "Yeah, they call that bullweed." I said, "Is it use it for anything?" He said, "Yeah, for the babies when they slobber." Well, I knew a little more about babies then. I knew that when the babies slobber is when they're teething. I thought, oh, holy cow! Here's an African American woman from South Georgia, a Native American from the Cherokee country, and they're all talking about the same use for the same plant. I thought, wow, that's getting interesting. So I said, "Well, Walker, how do they do it? What do they do with it?" He says, "You take it and they put it around their neck, put them like a necklace around a little piece of the root or the necklace around their neck." I said, "Do they chew on it?" He said, "No." He said, "Might be poison." Well, that family of plants actually is kind of has some toxins in it. And so I thought, well, let me go talk to some of the women or something like that. And there was a woman there named Gail Thrower. And she was a member of the Porch Creek band from Alabama. And I asked her about it. She said, "Oh, yeah, they use it for the babies when they're teething." She said, "I'll talk to the old ladies about that." And I said, "How do they do it?" She said, "Well, they take the pieces of the root and they put it on a little string and put it around the baby's neck." I said, "What do they call it?" She said, "They call it thread sass." I said, "Thread sass?" She said, "I said, like sewing thread?" She said, "Well, that's what it sounded like to me," she said. "And sash like sassafras?" She said, "Well, that's what it sounded like. It's thread sass." And I said, how do they do? They put it around the baby's neck, but they put it around tight enough so the baby can't get it in their mouth. And I thought, well, that's interesting. Interesting. Well, it turns out that this plant is in the member of the Solanum family, and there's a lot of potent plants in that family. And you know, in the old days, when you got seasick, they used to give you Dramamine pills. Well, nowadays they give you what they call a scope patch, scopolamine patch. And scopolamine is one of the ingredients that comes from the Solanum family of plants. And what they do is they give you a little patch, and you put it in on your temple or behind your ear, somewhere there, and the medication is transdermal, passes through the skin. So it dawned on me that could it be that this little baby's teeth in there kind of hurting, they're slobbering, or they're drooling a lot, and could it be that a little bit of that drool would drop down onto these little pieces of root that are around the baby's neck, and that little tiny bit of medication could be transdermal through the skin, and maybe that would actually give a little bit of a easing of the pain. Or it turns out that scopolamine poisoning, actually toxicity, one of the first symptoms is dryness of the mouth. So could it be it affects it that way? So I don't really quite know, but it was just like such an interesting journey. And then it's interesting, I was telling this to another friend of mine, a friend of mine from South Carolina, who was raised by his country dad. And he said, yeah, Daddy always talked about that. He called it tread saft. And I realized what he was calling it, tread saft. It was a tread, like tread softly. And saft is kind of the old Appalachian way of saying soft. And so really I realized that her interpretation of tread saft was the same as Bessie Jones's, which is really tread softly. And so it's just kind of interesting how that whole cycle living on such a journey that lasted, you know, more than a decade. And still goes on too, because I haven't really figured out exactly the chemistry involved yet. But so interesting to kind of track down a folk remedy. You know, while we're talking about those kind of things, here's a plant in the same family. This is called the thornapple or datura or Jimson weed. And it's sort of interesting. There's an interesting story about the Jimson weed. Robert Beverly wrote the history of the state of Virginia in 1705. He traveled into the Virginia colony, into Jamestown, and he reported on what he witnessed there. And I guess what happened is these soldiers had come in to quell a rebellion that was going on there, and the soldiers didn't have anything to eat. They found these greens growing around the edge of one of the pastures, and they picked the greens and cooked them. And this being an early plant was gathered very young and boiled for a salad by some of the soldiers sent thither. And some of them eat plentifully of it, the effect of which was a very pleasant comedy, for they turned natural fools upon it for several days. One would blow a feather up in the air, another would dart straws at it with much fury, another stark naked was sitting up in the corner like a monkey, grinning. A fourth would finally kiss and paw his companions and sneer in their faces. In this frantic condition, they were confined, lest they should in their folly destroy themselves, though it was observed that all their actions were full of innocence and good nature. Indeed, they were not very cleanly, for they would have wallowed in their own excrements if it had not been prevented. 1,000 such simple tricks they played, and after 11 days, returned to themselves again, not remembering anything that passed. So that's the first psychedelic trip taken by white people that was recorded in North America. So it's not a plant you'd really want to try because it's very dangerous. There have been a lot of fatalities involved with it. But what a story, huh? And ever since that, they call that plant Jamestown weed. And since that time, it's been corrupted. Now we call it Jimson weed, which is just a corruption of Jamestown weed. And, you know, speaking of those kind of things, you know, as I showed you my booth full of herbs, I had them all stuffed in the back of this Volkswagen van. And I used to go travel around and go explore different areas. I wanted to go into the deep south. And this was in the early 70s. And after the whole 60s controversies and all of that, and I got the Alabama welcome. Mind if we look in there? You know, what is all this stuff? And it all looked like it could be illegal, but of course I just kept giving them scientific names for all these herb teas and remedies that I had. And, you know, and it turned out that basically everything ended up just fine. But I think there's probably no better way to say the end. So it's been fun talking to you about some of my favorite plants, and I hope you all enjoyed that. And And I'm totally glad to have any questions or thoughts or comments. And great to be a part of it all. So Dave, do we come back or how do we go on from here?
Well, that indeed is a wonderful ending picture. I was massively entertained by those stories, Doug, and I want to thank you very much for being with us tonight. It was truly an entertainment and a education all at once, and so I'm much pleased that you came. I'm much pleased with your harmonica playing. I enjoyed that a lot too. So, do we have a question?
Let's see. We have oh, there's a few questions, but first, Anne is going to put up the your website, Doug, and anybody who is interested, we're going to give them an opportunity to have you market that a little bit. Do you want to say a few words about your website while she's getting that slide up or getting that?
Every couple of months or every now and then I find some interesting natural phenomenon. I write a little blog about it. So there's lots of interesting little articles about different things, plants, animals, all different kinds of things. And I've written a bunch of books and I have a bunch of recordings and some of them got some awards and it's all just fun stuff. It's kind of a mix of stories and songs and natural history all tied together. So well, that's it. So our audience can pretend they have questions. I'll pretend I have answers.
Okay, where I don't know where those questions are right now, but
Here we go.
okay.
That's the big question. Where's the question?
Okay, they're up on my screen. Did they come up on yours?
How does wintercress compare to bittercress?
Very similar. They're both kind of hot mustards.
Well, that was easy. You got a lot of people thanking you here. Okay, then Betsy's asking, do you have a book or can you tell us about books to help us identify edible plants and not poison ourselves?
I'd say probably the best books. There's lots of books out, but I'd say probably the best books that I've ever seen, and I've seen a lot of books, is written by Sam Thayer, Thayer. You can just Google him, I'm sure it'll come up. He has 3 different books. And what's interesting about him is that everything he talks about in the books, he has done and tried. It's not like reporting that is edible. And he includes a lot of plants that are not in the other plant books. The Peterson Field Guide is also good to edible plants.
Great. And Jacqueline is asking, is the invasive white flowering mustard eatable also? Yes,
it is. That'd be the what's it called?
Garlic mustard.
Garlic
mustard.
Yeah, they're edible, particularly early in the spring. And you know, again, it's a strong green. So generally they're cooked with a little bit of oil, a little bit of butter, and a little salt and pepper.
And then we have Emily would like a list of all these plants for reference.
Well, we should tell Emily that this program is going to be on a YouTube, and we will link you. Our website will link you to this program, so that might just answer the question.
That sounds like a good way to answer that one.
Oh, and make sure you go back to Doug's website and check out his materials that he has on that website for sale as well. Is there more?
And then, Doug, can you see the chat?
I see something there that says thank you.
I'm going to read it to you. You have a big fan club here. So from Devlin Graham, thank you, Doug Elliott. You are the best. From Betsy Rader, hi everyone, looking forward to this. Laurie Joe Edwards says Doug is awesome. I hope your hat still fits you when this is over.
Once you get to the questions.
Jay Bettler says happy to be here. Somebody's dancing in Hiram. A lot of people enjoying the music. Thanks for making this available. Enjoying the talk about watercress. Lots of thank yous and thank you, Doug's. I think that's it for the questions.
All right, well, great. Nice to be a part of it. Appreciate your good work up there, taking care of the natural world.
Okay.
There is one more question.
Okay.
It's on the screen. Do you see it?
No.
Oh, I don't know why. It says, Jay asked, do you have an album or 2 or 20 that I could purchase? I need more of this music in my life.
There's actually about 10 recordings. They're on my website. Most of them are available, or you can get downloads too.
Great,
Yeah, most of these songs are on that album.
great. And Doug, are there other programs that you do?
I have a calendar on my website that tells where I'll be and what I'll be doing.
Great, okay.
Okay, well, thanks so much for doing this. And I know everybody, at least from the comments and from lots of stuff there, everybody has really, really enjoyed it, Doug. So thank you very much. And I'm gonna, when we end the meeting, I am going to get my harmonica out and practice like hell. So thanks again. And thanks for the stories too. Really like stories.
The best harmonica advice I ever got was, when you get a note that works, wail.
Okay.
Advice for life, isn't it?
Yes.
All right, so that's a good way to close.
Okay. Thanks again, Doug, and good night.
See you all. Thank you.
Okay. Doug, thanks so much. We'll be in touch with you and wish you the best. And we're not done with you. We're going to have you back for another program sometime.
Okay, I'm in trouble now, right?
Yeah.